On the night of January 27th, 2018, just after 10 p.m., a devastating traffic accident occurred at a remote roundabout on the outskirts of Zhou City, Liaoning Province. A Beijing-licensed Toyota Highlander crashed straight into the median barrier at a horrifying speed, leaving behind a scene of devastation. The front end was mangled beyond recognition, and the entire vehicle was completely deformed. The accident scene was located in a desolate area, surrounded only by empty fields, less than half a mile from the city morgue. Even on normal days, this road saw little traffic, let alone on such a cold winter night. Fortunately, just minutes after the tragedy occurred, a passing driver discovered the scene and immediately called the police. Firefighters and traffic police quickly arrived at the scene. The condition of the crashed vehicle was truly dire. In the driver's seat sat a male driver, his head slumped forward on the steering wheel, all airbags deployed, groaning in pain and calling for help. In the passenger seat lay a woman face down, her head pointing toward the driver's seat, her feet still in the second row of seats, as if she had initially been sitting in the back row and was thrown forward during the crash. Firefighters tried to rouse the woman but got no response. All four doors and the rear trunk could not be opened, creating significant difficulties for the rescue operation. Even with professional demolition tools, after more than 10 minutes, the firefighters still couldn't open the car doors. The rescue progress was extremely slow. The fire department suggested moving the vehicle to a more open area to facilitate rescue operations, but this proposal was quickly rejected. The traffic police present at the scene had keenly noticed several abnormalities in this accident. Their professional instincts made them worry that moving the vehicle might destroy important evidence. The battle against time continued. After another tense period, the sound of metal clashing finally brought results. The driver's door was opened with the screech of cutting tools. At that moment, a strong smell of alcohol rushed out, making everyone immediately understand the situation. The answer seemed clear: a drunk driver, high speed, ending tragically in a head-on collision. The rescue operation proceeded with careful movements, cutting seatbelts, deflating airbags, then removing the victims. Miraculously, the driver was still alive, and the reason for his survival was quite obvious. His seatbelt was fastened tightly, a strange pillow was placed in front of his chest, and the airbag system had created an excellent shield of protection. Without these measures, the violent impact would certainly have left no chance for survival. The woman who traveled with him was not so fortunate. She had been sitting in the back seat of the car without wearing a seatbelt and was thrown forward during the impact. When emergency personnel arrived, the woman showed no signs of life and was pronounced dead at the scene. Although the male driver was lucky to keep his life, he was rushed directly to intensive care. After examination, the damage caused by the car accident was severe. Both of his legs were crushed with multiple fractures, 6 ribs were broken, and his intestines were severed in 3 places. After conducting a thorough examination of the scene, the investigation team reached preliminary conclusions. Technically, this was clearly a single-vehicle accident. There were no signs of collision with any other vehicle or person. However, there was one detail that puzzled traffic experts. The vehicle's trajectory was almost a perfect straight line heading directly into the wall, and most frightening of all, there were no brake marks whatsoever. The accident location was at the intersection of Zhongguan Road, Jinzhou City, just over half a mile from the Jinzhou City morgue, with no one around. Basically all farmland. This location was quite a distance from the urban area. Even during the day, there was very little vehicle and pedestrian traffic. So on such a cold night, how did a Beijing licensed vehicle end up here? Traffic police quickly obtained basic information about the 2 people in the accident. The male driver was named Zhou from Jinzhou, 49 years old. The woman who died in the back seat was named Yan Kun from Beijing, 43 years old. The 2 were husband and wife, with their work and normal life both in Beijing. After marriage, Yan Kun would return to Jinzhou with Zhou every year for Chinese New Year. In 2018, the couple planned to travel during the New Year holiday, so they came to Jinzhou before the New Year to visit Zhou parents. After learning the identities of the 2 people, traffic police quickly contacted their families. Yan Kun's mother was devastated to hear of her daughter's death. The couple had been in Jinzhou for more than 10 days and were preparing to return to Beijing on January 27th. On the afternoon of the accident, Yan Kun's mother had called her daughter asking when they could get home. At that time, Zhou Jin answered the phone and told his mother-in-law that they still had some other business that evening and wouldn't be leaving yet. Who could have thought that this phone call would be the mother's final goodbye to her daughter? Although this accident seemed very simple, the police felt something wasn't right about the accident scene, and there were quite a few things that didn't add up. The car crashed straight into the wall, and during rescue, they could smell alcohol in the car. Traffic police initially thought the accident was caused by drunk driving. Traffic police did find half a bottle of white liquor in the crashed car, but the bottle was perfectly intact and undamaged, with the cap screwed on quite tightly. Blood tests on Zhou Jin also detected no alcohol. Clearly, drunk driving was not the cause of the accident. So why would a sober driver crash straight into a wall at such speed at a deserted intersection? The situation became deadlocked when there were no clues from technology. This remote area had no security cameras, and the car was not equipped with a dash cam. No witnesses, no images. Only the silent scene remained with traces of metal and broken glass. The investigation team was forced to use the most traditional method, recreating the incident. They found a Toyota Highlander of the same year to conduct actual testing. Based on the horrific degree of deformation of the crashed vehicle, experts estimated that the speed at impact had reached 50 miles per hour. Technical analysis revealed a disturbing fact. From the angle and position of impact, the vehicle could not have come from the north. If it had come from the south at speeds over 45 miles per hour, the car would certainly have rolled over when taking the curve. After multiple field tests, the only conclusion was that the car had entered from the east side of the roundabout, then slightly adjusted direction and crashed straight into the protective wall. This question made the entire investigation team think deeply. Why would a completely sober person perform such an action? Could he have confused the brake and gas pedals in a moment of panic? But when forensic experts began to meticulously analyze the posture and position of the driver after impact, a terrifying truth gradually emerged. This might have been an intentional collision. The evidence began to piece together into a frightening picture. Zhou Jin was 5 feet 7 inches tall, of average build, but the driver's seat was pushed back to an abnormal degree. To reach the steering wheel, he had to stretch both arms straight out and crane his neck forward, an extremely uncomfortable posture that was unsuitable for safe driving. Even more notable was the large pillow placed tightly between his chest and the steering wheel. Initially, this pillow was seen as a lifesaver. Everyone thought Zhou Jin was lucky to have this shield for protection. Without it, he certainly wouldn't have survived the horrific impact. But looking at the overall picture, no driver would drive in such an awkward position. All these coincidences seemed like a carefully prepared protection plan before executing the car crash. Meanwhile, the contrast between the two victims further increased suspicion. Yan Kun, who paid with her life, was completely unprotected. The rear passenger seat was occupied by a suitcase, forcing her to sit in the most uncomfortable position, right in the middle of the back row. This was completely unreasonable. Anyone who has ever sat in the middle of the back row of an SUV knows it's the most uncomfortable position. The floor is raised, there are no armrests, and there's limited legroom. While the back row was completely empty, why would Yan Kun choose to sit in such an uncomfortable position instead of the more comfortable sides? It was as if she had been forced to sit there. An even more disturbing detail was her clothing. Yan Kun was wearing only underwear and was barefoot, as if she was preparing to sleep or had just woken up. In contrast, Zhou Jin was fully dressed in a thick down jacket. This discrepancy couldn't be explained by any reasonable cause. At this point, all investigative arrows pointed to one person, Zhou Jin. The emerging picture showed this might not have been a sudden accident, but possibly a carefully calculated plan. But one big question remained. With him also being so severely injured, what motive could have driven Zhou Jin to take such a reckless action? The investigation team found themselves in a dilemma. The suspicions were gradually forming in their minds, but drawing hasty conclusions could have unforeseeable consequences. After all, this was a married couple, and Zhou Jin was also hospitalized with serious injuries. If they shared these suspicions with the family, it would certainly cause a major shock to relatives on both sides. But with so many abnormalities, they couldn't simply treat this as an ordinary traffic accident. Time pressure began to mount as Yan Kun's family couldn't wait any longer. The pain of loss made them want to hold a funeral for the deceased as soon as possible. To complete the necessary procedures, police asked the family to bring Yan Kun's personal documents. The grieving relatives set off for the Beijing apartment to search. Then, something no one expected happened. While searching for documents, they accidentally discovered a suitcase containing a horrifying secret. It wasn't ordinary paperwork, but a mountain of thick insurance contracts. The 20-inch suitcase was stuffed to the brim with 30 different insurance contracts, covering most of the major insurance companies in the market. All were personal accident insurance policies, with Yan Kun and Zhou Jin listed as each other's beneficiaries. These insurance policies were numerous, each with enormous value, with premiums reaching tens of thousands of yuan per year. When totaled up, a terrifying figure emerged: 29 million yuan, approximately $4.2 million, the amount Zhou Jin would receive if Yan Kun died in an accident. What made everyone even more suspicious was the arrangement of beneficiaries. Both Yan Kun and Zhou Jin had been through a previous marriage, each having children from their former relationships. Both of their parents were also still alive and healthy. But in the beneficiary list, there were no names of children or parents from either side, only each other's names. Why would the two decide to buy such an enormous amount of insurance and designate only each other? This discovery was like lightning striking clear skies. Yan Kun's family stood stunned by this truth, unable to believe what they had just uncovered. At the same time, this was precisely the important clue the investigation team had been seeking. The picture began to clear. This might not have been a simple accident, but a meticulously planned crime. With this discovery, the decision to perform an autopsy on Yan Kun became inevitable. Faced with this evidence, Yan Kun's family made a painful but necessary decision. They agreed to allow the autopsy. But the suitcase full of insurance contracts had changed everything. Now they not only wanted to know how their daughter had died, but also to find the truth behind this death. A kind woman like Yan Kun couldn't pass away so mysteriously. While waiting for results from the forensic department, the investigation team didn't sit idle. They launched a large-scale investigation campaign, checking every security camera in the city to reconstruct the couple's final journey. This meticulous work paid off. 53 valuable images captured every movement of the vehicle on that fateful day. The timeline began to emerge clearly. Early morning at 9:03 a.m., the first camera caught Zhou Jin and Yan Kun on Liberation Road. Both were present in the car, appearing like a normal couple preparing to start their day. Afternoon at 1:19 p.m., the car left the city center heading toward the suburbs. By 5:01 p.m., they had appeared on the highway to Beijing. But this was when strange things began to happen. At 5:20 p.m., cameras recorded Zhou Jin driving into a roadside rest area. Notably, only he got out of the car and went into the restaurant, while Yan Kun remained in the vehicle. Why wouldn't the wife get out to rest during such a long journey? But what puzzled the entire investigation team was that at 7:20 p.m., the car suddenly turned around, once again heading toward Jinzhou instead of continuing to Beijing as planned. The last image of the car was recorded around 8 p.m. at a location only 1.9 miles from the accident scene, too close to be mere coincidence. Another disturbing detail stood out from these 53 photos. Only in the morning could Yan Kun be seen in the front seat. In all other images, only Zhou Jin was alone in the driver's compartment. This was completely abnormal for a couple traveling together. Zhou Jin's journey also lacked logic. His family lived right in Jinzhou City, but after returning, he didn't visit his parents and instead appeared in a remote, deserted area near the morgue. There was no reasonable explanation for this behavior. Faced with these obvious contradictions, the investigation team decided to go to the hospital to directly question Zhou Jin. Lying on the hospital bed with a pale face, Zhou Jin recounted his story in what seemed like a sincere manner. He emphasized the serious injuries he had suffered: 3 severed intestinal sections, both legs crushed, as if trying to prove he was also a victim. According to Zhou Jin's account, that day they had visited a local temple together, then set off for Beijing. Halfway through, he suddenly remembered important business to discuss with his sister, so decided to return to Jinzhou. Around 8 p.m., guessing his sister wasn't home yet, he parked by the roadside to rest. After 10 p.m., both woke up and continued driving, but being unfamiliar with the terrain, they got lost and eventually went astray into the accident area. The tragedy occurred when Yan Kun was using her phone while holding a cup of water, accidentally spilling hot water on her husband, causing him to lose composure and cause the accident. However, the investigation team found 2 cups in the car, a metal thermal cup and a plastic cup, but both were carefully covered with lids, showing no signs of having been opened or spilled. This raised major questions about the accuracy of Zhou Jin's testimony. A more serious contradiction emerged when Zhou Jin insisted that he and his wife had dined together at the rest area. But irrefutable evidence from security cameras showed a completely different reality. Only Zhou Jin alone left the vehicle and entered the dining area, while Yan Kun never appeared. This wasn't forgetfulness or oversight. This was intentional lying. At this point, the forensic examination results also provided clues. Through autopsy examination, Yan Kun in this accident suffered severe skull fractures. Nearly all ribs on the right side of her chest were broken. The entire right chest was in a collapsed state, the sternum was severed, and the spine was broken. Each of these injuries was fatal, and the actual cause of death was indeed traffic accident fatality. But the forensic examiner was puzzled that despite such severe injuries, Yan Kun's body showed no defensive wounds. Normally, when people encounter danger, instinct causes them to use both hands to protect their body or instinctively resist. But in such a tragic car accident, Yan Kun's hands showed no signs of this instinctive defensive behavior. This proved that when the accident occurred, Yan Kun was either asleep or in an unconscious state. The situation seemed to become complex. Police then sequentially tested Yan Kun's heart blood and chest cavity blood, as well as food in her stomach. This time, there was a major discovery. 2 types of nerve-inhibiting drugs were found in Yan Kun's body: carbamazepine and chlordiazepoxide. Both drugs can cause drowsiness and unconsciousness, with the chlordiazepoxide content in Yan Kun's body reaching levels sufficient to cause poisoning. When police combined all these clues together, everything that happened in this accident seemed explainable. Zhou Jin, to fraudulently obtain a large insurance payout, used drugs to render his wife unconscious, then under conditions of full self-protection, drove straight into the wall. Under normal circumstances, classifying the case as a traffic accident wouldn't be impossible. After all, Zhou Jin was also seriously injured. Fortunately, the traffic police were responsible and thorough, digging deep into the suspicious aspects of the accident, peeling away layers of fog to reveal the truth. The case investigation had become very clear at this point. Next, they just needed to find concrete evidence to bring Zhou Jin to justice. The search of Zhou Jin's home brought heartbreaking and surprising discoveries. Among the personal belongings, the investigation team found 36 pages written on both sides. Love letters Zhou Jin had written to his ex-wife. These letters were carefully hidden and always carried with him. This revealed a painful truth. Although he appeared happy with Yan Kun in his second marriage, Zhou Jin's heart still belonged to someone else. When delving into the financial situation, a picture of financial disaster gradually emerged. Zhou Jin's bank account was not only empty, but deeply in debt. His stock trading account had lost 3 million yuan, approximately $435,000. Whether in Jinzhou or Beijing, he owned no real estate and had no stable source of income. But ironically, Zhou Jin always tried to show Yan Kun's family that he was a wealthy and successful man. He constantly patched up his finances by borrowing from one place to pay another, even mortgaging Yan Kun's house in Beijing to have money to take his wife traveling everywhere, creating an appearance of luxury and affluence. The harsh truth was that even the mortgaged house was bought with money from Yan-kun's parents. Zhou Jin was living off his wife's family's money while pretending to be the provider. The financial burden on Zhou Jin's shoulders continued to pile up. Besides maintaining a fake luxurious lifestyle with Yan-kun, he also had to bear the responsibility of supporting his daughter from his previous marriage. The girl was studying at a prestigious private school in Beijing with enormous tuition fees of 150,000 yuan, 21,700 per year, an expense Zhou Jin had to bear completely alone. Additionally, the couple spent 180,000 yuan, $26,000 annually on insurance contracts. By the time before the accident, Zhou Jin was deep in debt for over 6 million yuan, approximately $870,000. Without some miracle, complete bankruptcy was just a matter of time. Combined with insincere feelings toward his current wife, all this created a clear criminal motive. The investigation team decided to focus on two key breakthrough directions. First was tracing the source of the toxic substances in Yan-kun's body. Second was finding evidence proving Zhou Jin had intentionally caused the accident. Yan-kun's family provided important medical information. Yan-kun had suffered from epilepsy as a child, but after giving birth, the condition had completely remitted. Therefore, finding carbamazepine, an epilepsy medication, in her body was completely reasonable. However, chlordiazepoxide was an entirely different story. Not only was there no reason for this drug to appear in Yan-kun's body, but it was also extremely dangerous for her as it could trigger epileptic seizures again. This was precisely the type of medication Yan-kun absolutely should not use. But despite extensive verification, police found no records of Zhou Jin and Yan-kun purchasing chlordiazepoxide. The drug clue was broken, but there was a major discovery in the vehicle information. Most people might not know that cars also have devices similar to airplane black boxes. They record the driving status of the car during accidents in parametric form, including engine speed and a series of vehicle information. This type of car black box is technically called an airbag control module, as it controls airbag deployment and records vehicle information at the moment of deployment. Police urgently found the crashed car's module and sent it for examination. The examination report quickly provided chilling information. In the period from 4.2 seconds to 0.2 seconds before the accident occurred, the car's speed increased straight from 51 miles per hour to 55 miles per hour, with engine RPM jumping from 2,400 to 4,000 RPM in an instant. Until the final moment of impact, the brakes were never activated. All the data showed that Zhou Jin was forcefully pressing the gas pedal and pressing it to the extreme until crashing into the wall. At this point, police determined Zhou Jin was involved in intentional murder and insurance fraud. Therefore, police quickly went to Zhou Jin's home to arrest him. When police mentioned taking Zhou Jin's phone for temporary custody, Zhou Jin suddenly became particularly sensitive and stubborn. Zhou Jin craftily claimed sometimes that the phone wasn't at home, other times questioning the police and threatening to find a lawyer. He forgot that police had just called his phone before arriving, making denial impossible. He pulled his phone out from under the mattress. Seeing Zhou Jin's panic and constant reluctance to hand over his phone, police astutely sensed there must be problems with the phone. After obtaining Zhou Jin's phone, a WeChat money transfer record caught police attention. The recipient had the ID Sex Girl, and the transfer amount was 530 yuan, 77. Police checked Sex Girl's WeChat personal page and found she was an online seller of sex products. After deeper police investigation, they discovered Zhou Jin had bought the powerful sedative triazolam, a drug listed by the state as controlled, with strong sedative effects. It turned out the person with ID Sex Girl had posted information selling triazolam on her personal page, clearly writing it was a powerful sedative with fast action, colorless and odorless, causing people to quickly become unconscious. This personal status was only posted for 45 minutes before Zhou Jin transferred money to her. During police interrogation, Zhou Jin admitted to buying triazolam, but he lied, saying he bought it for his mother to help her sleep. This lie was too unbelievable. Because Zhou Jin's sister worked at a hospital, if medication was needed, Zhou Jin wouldn't need to buy it. Even if Zhou Jin bought it for his mother's insomnia, spending 530 yuan on sleeping pills made no sense. So police investigated slowly, layer by layer, and found the person who sold drugs to Zhou Jin, surnamed Zhou. Zhou confessed that he actually didn't sell triazolam, but used chlordiazepoxide to counterfeit triazolam for sale, because triazolam was a banned drug under strict supervision. Zhou devised a method of using chlordiazepoxide to fake triazolam, hanging a sheep's head while selling dog meat. At this point, police finally clarified the source of chlordiazepoxide in Yan Kun's body. The chain of evidence was clear. When the entire case became clear to Yan Kun's family, they were extremely shocked. No one knew Zhou Jin was such a person with a human face but beast's heart. Normally, Zhou Jin appeared particularly thoughtful and meticulous toward Yan Kun in front of her family, caring for Yan Kun devotedly. Yan Kun's parents were very comforted, not only not minding that Zhou Jin didn't have Beijing household registration, but also sold their old house in East 3rd Ring Road to buy them a 1,916 square foot house. Yan Kun's parents didn't need their daughter to be wealthy, they just hoped she could live happily. Who would have thought, you can know someone's face but not their heart? When Zhou Jin's case of murdering his wife for insurance fraud was exposed, Yan Kun's family remembered another accident involving Yan Kun and Zhou Jin 2 months earlier, which truly made people shudder. At the end of 2017, the couple had experienced another accident on a deserted coastal road in Jinzhou. Also after 11 p.m., also with Zhou Jin driving, also the same familiar car crashing straight into a streetlight pole. The hollow pole was broken in half from the impact, but fortunately both were wearing seat belts. Zhou Jin wasn't drinking. The airbags functioned normally, so no one was seriously injured, but Yan Kun had been unconscious for 3.5 hours. At that time, Yan Kun was taken to the hospital for emergency treatment, and doctors also found it very strange. Through examination, they found no medical reason to explain Yan Kun's unconscious state. The medical team's confusion was clearly shown in the diagnostic report with 3 large question marks. When doctors wanted to conduct additional tests to investigate the cause, Yan Kun woke up and was hastily taken home by Zhou Jin. At that time, Yan Kun's mother thought her daughter's old epilepsy had relapsed and was even grateful to Zhou Jin for his devoted care. She had no idea that everything was just experimental steps in Zhou Jin's cruel plan. 2 months later, that plan was executed perfectly, and Yan Kun paid the price with her very life. Even when evidence piled up like mountains, Zhou Jin stubbornly refused to admit his crimes. Finally, in November 2021, justice was served when Zhou Jin received the death penalty, a fitting end for someone who had betrayed marital trust in the most ruthless way. This was not just punishment for an individual, but also a strong warning to those harboring evil intentions, because the law may come slowly, but it never fails to appear. We hope this heartbreaking story will help us treasure sincere feelings in life more, while always staying alert to potential dangers around us. And that concludes today's case. Thank you for following along, and we'll see you in the next videos.